Today's subject is a man whose charm lit up the silver screen, whose face defined 1950s cool, and whose name became synonymous with classic Hollywood, Tony Curtis. He played heroes, rogues, and legends, starred in over 100 films, and lived a life bigger than most of his characters. But behind the movie posters, the red carpets, and the whirlwind of 6 marriages is a different story. The story of 6 children, scattered across countries and decades, who each inherited not just a famous name, but the fallout that came with it. This is the story of Tony Curtis and what happened to his 6 children. Jamie Lee Curtis, redefining the family name. In 1958, Jamie Lee Curtis was born on November 22nd, the youngest daughter of Hollywood icons Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh. Her childhood unfolded beneath the glare of celebrity, but lacked stability. By age 3, her parents had divorced, and Jamie was raised in 2 separate worlds, her mother's structure and her father's distance. 1960s-70s, Jamie struggled in school, was expelled from multiple institutions, and felt like an outsider even within her famous family. She had no plans to act, partly out of rebellion, partly to avoid living in her father's shadow, which loomed large and emotionally absent. By 1978, at 20, she landed the lead in Halloween, a low-budget horror film that launched her career overnight. She became the original Scream Queen, using fear not as a gimmick, but as a gateway to authenticity. It was the first step in separating her identity from her father's. 1980s, Jamie expanded into comedies and dramas, Trading Places, A Fish Called Wanda, and proved her range. But off-screen, she wrestled with grief over her brother Nicholas's addiction and death, and a strained relationship with Tony Curtis that remained largely unresolved. 1990s, she got sober in 1999, adopted 2 children with husband Christopher Guest, and quietly stepped into authorship. Her children's books became bestsellers, praised for their honesty and emotional depth, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos of her upbringing. 2000s, 2010s, Jamie took fewer film roles but became a public voice for recovery, adoption, LGBTQ rights, and mental health. When Tony Curtis died in 2010 and excluded her from his will, she responded with quiet detachment, having long since built a life on her own terms. By 2023, at 64, Jamie Lee Curtis won the Oscar for Everything Everywhere All at Once. She didn't mention her father. Instead, she honored the journey of motherhood, healing, and personal transformation, marking a full-circle moment not of revenge, but of release. Now, Jamie Lee Curtis stands as a symbol of resilience, a woman who didn't inherit her father's legacy. She survived it, outgrew it, and transformed it into something stronger. She didn't chase his spotlight, she created her own. Kelly Curtis, choosing quiet over fame. In 1956, Kelly Curtis was born on June 17th, the first daughter of Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh. From birth, she lived in the shadow of movie stardom, but while cameras followed her parents, Kelly kept to the background, observant, private, and quiet. By 1962, at age 6, her parents divorced. Tony drifted in and out of her life, while Kelly was raised mostly by her mother. She witnessed early how fame could fracture a family and learned not to chase it. 1970s, Kelly studied business at Skidmore College, steering clear of acting at first, but eventually the pull of the industry returned, and she enrolled at the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute, quietly entering the same world that had once defined her parents. 1980s, Kelly appeared in a handful of films and TV shows, including Magic Sticks and The Sentinel, earning modest roles but never breaking into stardom. Unlike her sister Jamie, Kelly didn't push for fame. She remained grounded, often choosing stability over spotlight. By 1989, she married playwright and director Scott Morphy, building a private life far from Hollywood's chaos. Soon after, she shifted behind the scenes, working as a production assistant on projects that often included her sister, like Freaky Friday and You Again. 2000s, 2010s. Kelly stayed largely silent as family tensions around Tony's will and personal life surfaced. She avoided interviews, stayed away from public drama, and never commented on being excluded from her father's inheritance. Now, in her late 60s, Kelly Curtis remains a quiet contrast in the Curtis legacy. While others chased cameras, she chose calm. She never used the family name as leverage, and in doing so, she protected something Hollywood rarely gives: peace. Alexandra Curtis, walking away from spotlight. In 1964, Alexandra Curtis was born in July 1964, the first daughter of Tony Curtis and German actress Christine Kaufmann. She spent her earliest years in Europe, far from Hollywood's chaos, raised between German press attention and her parents' high-profile split just 2 years after her birth. Late 1960s, 1970s, after Tony and Christine's divorce, Alexandra remained mostly with her mother in Germany. Unlike Jamie and Kelly, Alexandra didn't grow up in Los Angeles. She grew up in Munich, in a different language, a different culture, and under a different kind of spotlight. But the Curtis name still followed her, especially in German tabloids that fixated on the daughter of two screen stars. 1980s. As a teenager and young adult, Alexandra tested the waters of acting, appearing in small European film and TV projects. With dark features and a sharp presence, she had the look of a leading actress, but never broke out in a major way. Unlike her father, who built a career off charm, Alexandra's on-screen energy was more serious, more restrained. 1990s, 2000s. Over time, Alexandra faded from the film world. She never became a household name, nor did she seem to seek it. Her appearances in the public eye became rare. She built a life away from the press, declining interviews and stepping quietly out of the family's shadow. While her sister Allegra occasionally spoke about their famous father, Alexandra rarely did. Her relationship with Tony was described as polite but distant. Now, in her 60s, Alexandra Curtis lives a life entirely off camera. She never pursued Hollywood, never leaned into the Curtis surname, and never capitalized on her bloodline. Among Tony's children, she is one of the most private, someone who grew up surrounded by fame, then deliberately walked the other way. Allegra Curtis, holding two worlds together. In 1966, Allegra Curtis was born on July 11th, the second daughter of Tony Curtis and Christine Kaufmann, just 2 years after her sister Alexandra. Born into a German-American family of actors, Allegra spent her childhood between two countries, America and Germany, but mostly under her mother's care after her parents' divorce in 1968. From a young age, she understood what fame looked like, but also what it cost. 1970s, 1980s. Like her sister, Allegra was raised in Germany and grew up speaking both English and German. While her American half-siblings were immersed in Hollywood, Allegra experienced a quieter European version of celebrity. She began acting in small German films and made-for-TV movies, carving out a modest presence in the entertainment world, but always under the looming association with her father's name. 1990s. Allegra expanded her career in both acting and business. She made occasional film appearances, often in German-language projects, and maintained a sporadic connection with Hollywood. Unlike Jamie Lee, Allegra never achieved international fame, but she stayed in the orbit of the Curtis legacy, not chasing it, but never fully leaving it either. 2000s. While her film appearances became less frequent, Allegra remained active in the media through interviews and public appearances, especially in Germany. She occasionally opened up about her relationship with her father, describing it as complicated but affectionate. Unlike Alexandra, who stayed silent, Allegra offered glimpses into Tony Curtis's European side. His charisma, his distance, and his charm as a father who came and went like a star crossing the sky. By 2012, after the death of their mother, Christine Kaufmann, Allegra briefly stepped into the spotlight in Germany. She took part in TV reality shows and spoke about balancing the Curtis legacy with her own identity, often expressing pride in her mixed heritage. Now, in her late 50s, Allegra Curtis leads a private but expressive life. She has shifted away from acting and focused on health and wellness projects in Germany. Among all of Tony's daughters, Allegra is the one who stayed closest to the public, not through Hollywood, but through personal resilience, European fame, and a steady voice about what it meant to grow up with a famous father and live beyond his shadow. Nicholas Curtis, the son who didn't survive. In 1970, Nicholas Curtis was born on December 21st, 1970, the first son of Tony Curtis and his third wife, Leslie Allen. From the beginning, Nicholas carried a different kind of pressure. He wasn't just the son of a movie star. He was the first boy in a family built on performance, and Tony pinned quiet hopes on him. 1970s, 1980s. Nicholas was raised mostly away from the public eye, shielded somewhat by Tony's shifting marriages and fading screen presence. As Tony aged, he grew more absent and more distracted, and Nicholas, quiet, artistic, and sensitive, grew up craving connection. Music became his world. While his half-sisters took acting roles, Nicholas found peace behind instruments and inside lyrics. He didn't want cameras, he wanted rhythm. Late 1980s, early 1990s. As a young adult, Nicholas began exploring a career in music. He performed locally, wrote songs, and struggled silently with addiction, a pattern that eerily echoed parts of his father's past. Though Tony himself had battled substance abuse, he was largely unable to intervene as Nicholas spiraled. The relationship between father and son was strained, loving at times but distant, and filled with unmet expectations. By 1994, on July 1994, at just 23 years old, Nicholas Curtis died from a heroin overdose. The tragedy rocked the Curtis family. Jamie Lee Curtis later revealed that Nicholas had been clean, had relapsed once, and that one time cost him his life. His death wasn't just a personal loss. It became a warning, a turning point. For Jamie, it marked the beginning of her own path to sobriety. For Tony, it was a reminder that fame could not shield you from grief. Benjamin Curtis, the quietest of them all. In 1973, Benjamin Curtis was born on May 2nd, 1973, the second son of Tony Curtis and Leslie Allen, and the younger brother of Nicholas Curtis. He arrived into a family still orbiting fame, but already beginning to fracture. By the time Benjamin was old enough to walk, his parents' marriage was unraveling, and his father, decades into a Hollywood career, was more legend than presence. 1970s, 1980s, raised mostly by his mother after Tony split from Leslie, Benjamin grew up in the long shadow of his father's spotlight and the lingering pain of his brother's struggle. While the world knew the Curtis name for charm, wit, and cinematic legacy, Benjamin lived through its cost: fame without intimacy, attention without affection. He didn't seek Hollywood. He watched it from afar, distant, wary, and disinterested. By 1994, the death of his brother Nicholas from a heroin overdose was a devastating blow. Benjamin was just 21. The loss hardened him, not with rebellion, but with resolve. While others mourned publicly, Benjamin turned inward. He didn't give interviews. He didn't enter rehab clinics or red carpets. He chose silence, and with it, survival. 2000s, 2010s. As Tony Curtis aged and entered his final chapter, Benjamin remained largely absent from public photos and press stories. Unlike Jamie or Allegra, he didn't walk beside his father at premieres or charity galas. And when Tony controversially cut all his children out of his will in 2010, Benjamin, like most of his siblings, remained publicly silent. But those close to the family say he held the least resentment because he had asked for the least. Now, in his 50s, Benjamin Curtis lives a quiet, private life, far removed from the celebrity machine that shaped and strained his family. Among Tony's 6 children, he's the least seen, the least heard, and perhaps the one who understood early that survival meant stepping out of the spotlight completely. He didn't inherit his father's fame. He inherited the lesson of what it cost and chose a different life. 6 children, each with the same last name, but none with the same story. One became a star and outshined the legacy. One stayed behind the camera and chose peace over fame. 2 drifted through Europe, carrying the Curtis name in quiet corners of Germany. One never made it past his 20s, a casualty of the chaos he was born into. And one, the quietest, walked away from it all before it could touch him. They didn't rise together. They didn't rebel together. They didn't inherit their father's fame. They survived it. His spotlight cast long shadows. Some stepped into it, some disappeared behind it, but all were shaped by the man the world celebrated and the father they barely knew. If you found this breakdown powerful and want more deep dives into the hidden lives of Hollywood's forgotten children, subscribe to After the Fame. Your support brings these invisible stories to light. Thanks for listening.